Welcome back to the Lazypug Review Show. I'm Lazypug. Today we will be talking about professional wrestling and movies and answer the question, what's the best wrestling movie? But before I get into that, I want to thank you all for the positive response from the last video. I'm making serious strides here in becoming a pro YouTuber. Gained over 100 subscribers, got over 4,000 views, got a lot of positive comments. Some negative comments, but alas, the negative comment did point out my bland setup here, which is what I feared. So, I got my order of Blu-rays, and I'm working my way to get a whole shelf. Can you imagine that? A whole shelf of Blu-rays right here? But I'm not quite there yet. But that's coming. Please like and subscribe so I can get my shelf of Blu-rays one day. But enough the preamble. Let's get the episode started. Here's Lazypug Reviews. I feel a little pressure with this video. I thought a lot about what I can possibly talk about. I thought about comparing Moneyball and basketball. I was thinking about being extremely topical and talking about the greatest beer run and the decline of studio comedies. I even thought about doing a video about the Batman. Ugh. But I'm not that guy. I'm just doing me with these videos. I got my answer through a user comment about what to do next. The user comment was making fun of my last video because I had a few wrestling references. But I've been a wrestling fan longer than I've been a movie fan. One of my early memories was being in a theater, was watching Ready to Rumble. That's cinematic masterpiece. So I thought, why not do a whole video on wrestling in movies? There's a lot there, but as I was looking at various lists of wrestling movies, I was slowly starting to realize something. Wrestling is always real in the movies, whether it's Nacho Libre fighting for the kids at the end of Nacho Libre, or Spider-Man kicking Macho Man's ass in Spider-Man. There isn't a lot of truth in movies with wrestling. And I suppose it's because wrestling is its own art form and it's kind of hard to replicate in movies. Nobody wants to see Goldberg and Sting work out a match before saving Jimmy the King from certain doom and Ready to Rumble. It's hard to make that look exciting for the viewer. So at best with the movies, you get a sort of cheap replication of wrestling. And I'm strictly talking about narrative films here. Of course, there's going to be a few nerds in the comments being like, actually, Lazypug, there's Beyond the Mat, Wrestling with Shadows, and Fake It So Real. But I'm talking about real insight in the wrestling business and narrative films. I want to see that, warts and all. And there's a lot of warts in wrestling. Something most audiences don't want to see. We don't want to see wrestling struggling to make ends meet because the promoter screwed them over. That's not really entertaining. Even movies about professional wrestling, like the 2018 film Fighting With My Family, about the true life story of Paige from the WWE, is still done in kayfabe. Wait, what's kayfabe? I'm showing my true nerd colors here. Kayfabe is a popular term I've learned in wrestling message board communities that comes from performers themselves. It's basically keeping the performance real. When Stone Cold is fighting The Rock, we know it's a work. We know they're friends. We know it's scripted. But we don't want to see The Rock and Austin shaking hands after their epic battle in WrestleMania 17. We know Austin and The Rock are only pretending to not like each other. That's kayfabe. We pretend that we don't know. When the wrestlers are in front of an audience, they don't break character. So in movies, kayfabe is never broken. Spider-Man and Macho Man aren't kicking back. The match in the movies were real. Can a movie about wrestling be done real? Well, yeah. The most famous movie about professional wrestling was done that way. In 2008, Darren Aronofsky made The Wrestler to almost universal acclaim. It was loved by film critics and audiences alike, and even professional wrestlers applauded its realism, even if at times it was too dark. Bret Hart famously criticized the movie for being almost too much of a downer, which is kind of ironic because Bret Hart has had one of the most depressing wrestling careers one can imagine, and that's discounting the kick Goldberg gave him that ended his career. Bret's still salty about that all these years later. Hey Knives, you used to wrestle, right?
Used to backyard wrestle for like about 10 years, man.
Nice. What can you tell me about that?
I can tell you that CTE is real. I can tell you that it hurts to sneeze.
When you think about professional wrestling movies, what feels truer to those experiences? Something like Ready to Rumble or The Wrestler?
The Wrestler, 100%. There's that sequence with Randy the Ram and the Necro Butcher. And it's not even the gore and the staple guns and the light tubes and the barbed wire that is more in tune with real life to me. It's the aftermath. It's when the locker room's empty and it's just you and your wounds.
So have you seen the film about Paige?
Yes.
Fighting for Family?
Yes. I think that movie's a propaganda film.
Yeah.
It was produced by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. You know, and I think he's trying to, I don't know why he was encapsulated by Paige's story, but he saw that he could profit off of it. I know this is a very cynical take,
Yeah.
but I think it's really about WWE is the place where dreams come true. And I don't know how real that is.
I think of that scene in They Live where they're having a street fight.
Yes.
And it's pretty much wrestling, but it's a street fight. And
Yes.
I love how that's done.
Yeah, besides, that's the closest thing. That's the closest to second, other than if you remove the wrestler from the conversation, They Live, that sequence, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, back to the wrestler. What do I think of the wrestler? Well, I kind of love it. I remember when I was in high school, me and my buds would do the Randy the Ram pose to each other anytime we saw each other in the hallway. That's how we greeted each other. We did the Randy. I think overall what makes the wrestler work is that not only is it aggressively depressing, but it also has a nice way of painting exactly how the characters feel. I think sometimes people get lost in the sauce when they go for realism and forget we're watching a movie. So the wrestler, we have characters expressing exactly their fears, their thoughts, their insecurities, all while keeping that illusion of reality. Some might say that's very wrestler-esque. You may be asking yourself, hey Lazypug, is that what your favorite wrestling movie is? Well, I think there's one other film in its way, but that's for later in the video. To keep with the format of the show, I will be discussing a couple of different aspects of the film and explain how it all works individually and as part of a larger picture.
Let's start with the opening credits, which I think at face value seems kind of meaningless, but it does tell you a lot about our protagonist's backstory without spending too much time on exposition. The reason why I think the opening credits for the wrestler is one of my all-time favorites is because it tells a whole story. We understand when Randy was big, thanks to the classic 80s track underneath, and how big he was because of the various press clippings. It's a great piece of storytelling that can only be done in a movie. And when the music wraps, we see Randy alone, getting ready in a children's classroom, and it tells you how far he has fallen. Great work, Mr. Aronofsky. Solid 8 out of 10. Can't beat this really. But I do want to throw in one forgotten film by an all-time great director in discussing of wrestling films. It's overlooked for sure, the least famous by said director, but nevertheless, I want to talk about it because I think it's kind of rad and it's about wrestling. In 1978, coming off the success of Rocky, Sylvester Stallone attempted to do what he did for boxing with professional wrestling. Paradise Alley follows three brothers as they try to make ends meet in an unfair world. One lies, cheats, and fails to try to get to the top. One has all but given up on life after losing part of himself in a war overseas. And the last one's trying to make an honest living as a lowly paid ice hauler. Sly's character, Cosmo, realizes that their meal ticket and way out of their situation is with their youngest brother, Victor. Victor is a brute who isn't very smart, but he doesn't want to lose any part of himself like his brother Lenny. Victor doesn't want to be another victim in Cosmo's schemes, but he does have dreams. He wants to buy a boat and run away with his girlfriend Susan. A lot of the characters' motivations aren't explicitly said, but they are shown, especially if you're watching closely. And my favorite example of the film is whenever Victor decides to go into wrestling. You see his struggle lugging a giant piece of ice up several flights of stairs. The way Sylvester Stallone shows the struggle on Vic's face is just masterful. And he ends the scene with the captivating image of ice shattering into a million little pieces. Beautiful stuff. 8 out of 10. Stallone really let it all hang out with this scene. Would watch again.
Going backwards a little bit, I want to talk about the opening credits of Paradise Alley.
And it's funny you should mention Rocky Balboa.
What? Dude, who are you? I didn't mention any of the Rocky movies. And also, are you British, man?
Hey Lazypug, it's Dan here from SuperBobHoskinBros.
Everybody's favourite YouTube channel.
And are you sure you didn't say something about Rocky Balboa?
100% I was talking about Paradise Alley.
Oh, I know what's happened.
I must have gotten confused because the 2006 DVD of Paradise Alley looks just like Rocky Balboa for some reason.
But since we're on the subject,
I've always felt like the Rocky movies go together in twos. 1 and 2 telling the more sincere underdog stories, 3 and 4 the more outlandish and hyper-realistic, and Rocky 5 and Balboa humbling the character and bringing the series back to its roots. And there's usually at least one scene per film that, when it comes along, cements what kind of Rocky movie we're in.
and in Rocky 3, that's the wrestling scene.
Okay, but what does Rocky Balboa got to do with Cosmo from Paradise Alley? They're two completely different characters.
Well, the Rocky we're introduced to in Rocky 3 is a completely different character too.
He stands taller, moves more confidently, he even looks physically different.
Oh, nice. Look, you fixed your face up, handsome. Nice clothes. What'd you do for Paulie? Anything?
The defining aspect of Rocky in this film is ego. Look at Rocky and Apollo Creed in the previous films. Apollo knows how to put on a show, but Rocky is so green, so incompetent at everything.
Action.
In the morning, I splash it on, and it makes me smell mainly.
Smeal mainly?
But now he's reveling in it.
The scene where Rocky is pitted against Thunderlips, a professional wrestler played by Hulk Hogan,
Thunderlips is here, in the flesh, baby.
is the first real fight of the movie, discounting the montage at the beginning. And if you want the perfect example of the series' shift in tone, compare this to the first fight of the first movie.
So I used to work in a shop, right? And this one time we got sent in these giant Hulk Hogan figures.
There were only 2 of them ever sent in from the warehouse, and after they both sold, they never came back in again.
Giant Hogan toy? What? What does this have to do with any of the points? Or your point for that matter?
Nothing at all. Which is what I used to think this scene added to Rocky 3.
This match is so silly and ridiculous. Characters are quipping constantly.
Why are they carrying him?
He's walking. Nobody else does this much for charity.
Bob Hope would.
You better call Bob Hope.
How much do you think he eats?
About 202 pounds.
Weighing 202 pounds, the reigning heavyweight champion of the world.
Everything is played for laughs, and it's just surreal to watch. But if you look a little closer, you'll notice that while it's distracting its audience with the most nonsensical set piece imaginable, it's actually tying together multiple plot threads and setting the main story in motion. To what extent the characters think this is real is kind of up for debate during the scene, with the reveal at the end seemingly showing Rocky fully clued into the facade. Under the surface, there's an interesting dynamic at play here though, which is that the 10 title defences before this had been handpicked by Mickey without Rocky's knowledge.
Oh, what are you talking about? I've had 10 title defenses.
He was handpicked.
Making the wrestling match the one time in the movie that Rocky is aware of the sham, but Mickey isn't. This gives us a window through which we see Mickey's concern for Rocky, and the visible toll it takes on his health.
And I'm not trying to spoil Rocky 3 for anyone who hasn't gotten a chance to see it in the past 4 decades.
But let's just say it's not the last time Mickey's health comes up in the film. Up to this scene, we've also been given glimpses of Clubber Lang, following Rocky's career and climbing the ranks himself, recognising the title defences as farce, and I think this is the point at which he loses his last scrap of patience with Rocky.
Clubber Lang sees this match the same way as we the audience do. As a joke.
I used to think this scene was just dumb, and maybe it's a little self-indulgent and bizarre,
but if you can look past the blatant wackiness on display, the character motivations, the peril, the heart of Rocky 3, it's all in this scene.
Right. Guy actually makes a solid point there. Rocky 3 is really good. Anyways, back to Paradise Alley.
Back to the opening credit sequence. We see our protagonist talking to a few different shady people, asking about a race. We assume it's going to be a foot race. But no. Stallone put some added pressure into it. First thing I want to point out is that song. Great song by one of my favorite film composers, Bill Conti, and it's sung by Sylvester Stallone. You heard me right. This is Stallone's directorial debut. Not only did he write it, he stars in it and even sings the title song. He really believed in this movie. Shame it flopped. At least Stallone didn't totally give up singing.
Budweiser, you created a monster.
Paradise Alley song is a perfect blend of nostalgia, regret, and wanting more out of life. It's the Uncle Rico of movie songs.
Yeah, coach would have put me in fourth quarter. We'd have been
Anyways, this ain't no more foot race. They're racing across rooftops, and Stallone focuses on the athletic ability of doing that. It's kind of a jarring scene. I've shown this movie to many of my friends, and they immediately get turned off about how ridiculous the opening scene is. Stallone has this great interview where he talks about Paradise Alley. I could be misremembering this, but he says with the opening montage, he wanted to show just how desperate these guys were for money. They were putting their lives at risk for $5. They got nothing to live for, no future. Much like Randy the Ram. Well, as much as I can talk about the wrestler and all the beautiful scenes throughout, like Randy having difficulty going back to a normal life or struggling to reconnect with his abandoned daughter,
Calm down.
I personally want to focus on, well, the wrestling. There are a few matches I could go over, but which one do I pick? Should I go for the hardcore one, the first match, or that last match? Maybe I could talk about two.
Maybe that could work, but this is my YouTube video here. I'm going to talk about all of them. Yeah, why not? Let's talk about all of them.
The wrestler does this seemingly small thing throughout the film to let the audiences know what to expect, laying little Easter eggs, if you will. Before the first match, Randy's getting a blade ready. Like our boy Hitchcock once said, let the audience know there's a bomb. That is the right quote, right? Yeah, I think that's the right quote. Audience must be asking, what's the blade for? Is he going to stab his opponent? Well, let's see. Randy's fighting some jobber with the mohawk. The cinematographer Maurice Alberti is shooting on gorgeous 60mm film and really gets close to the performers. We get to hear the kayfabe from the ref and the performers, see Randy grab the blade and cut his forehead open. After Randy's had enough, he hulks out and gets the W. Feels really close to an actual wrestling match. Turn on Raw or Dynamite, and this is what you will see. The match I was most excited to cover was the second match against Necro Butcher, a real quasi-famous wrestler at the time. I'm no wrestling historian, but I believe the kids call this kind of match a death match. Man, the fact Mickey Rourke agreed to this should have gotten him the Oscar. The scene is great because we get to see the cause and effect of the match. I love how Darren Aronofsky's cuts back and forth from the doctors fixing the wrestlers to what caused the damage. Randy feeling the effects from the headshots to the shattering glass on his back. This stuff is so great. So great, in fact, that it almost ruins the movie a little bit.
For me, at least. So, slight sidetrack here. Goldberg was a big wrestler back in the 90s, much like Bojack. Very recently, he's been doing these matches where he can't work at all, but people still eat it up. And I can't help but think, a wrestler as big as Randy the Ram, wouldn't he at least be in TNA? Like, I get maybe he wouldn't be in WWE, but at least TNA. I just feel like if he's having freaking matches like Jon Moxley here, I just don't get why he's not like actually wrestling for real promotions. Shouldn't be living in a van, like in any universe, you know what I mean?
Another good point too.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't this WWE want him? But the reality is,
he's such a fuck up. I know that. Yeah, but Scott Hall was still in TNA at that time, dude. Wrestling fans have no limits on what they want to see. They watch almost any legend. That's how they pay their respects. Like if Randy only got as big as like Virgil or something, then I would understand. But this dude was main eventing Madison Square Garden. After this match, I feel like WWE and Vince McMahon be like, dude, we want you. Anyways, back to the movie.
In his final match, Randy is fighting his Iron Sheik, the Ayatollah. I love the actor playing the Ayatollah because he just gives me regular dude vibes. My favorite scene in the whole movie is when Randy is asking him about how to book the match, and Ayatollah says,
right here. I'm the heel and you're the face.
That's the most inside baseball scene of the movie, and I love it. Cassidy is trying to stop Randy from doing his final match because she knows it's probably going to kill him. When she finally meets face to face with him, we get the emotional climax of the movie. Will Randy choose a normal, stable life with Cassidy, or will he die in the ring? Welcome to a moment in movie history.
You hear them? This is where I belong.
Freaking legend. Comes out to Guns N' Roses and gives a 5-star match while having a heart attack. Whew, that's the Randy the Ram I know.
So this final match is great because it's a perfect illustration of what I've been talking about throughout the video. Ayatollah notices Randy is 100% and gives him instruction on how to finish the match. This is very common in wrestling when a performer is hurt, or you see a John Cena match. So you know wrestling in the movie isn't real, but the drama comes from how far will Randy take it. It's a great ending and makes the audience aware that wrestling isn't real, but goddamn is it dramatic. Now to contrast the fake wrestling and the wrestler, we gotta go back to the real wrestling in Paradise Alley. So Paradise Alley is in kayfabe. We don't see Victor calling spots or being told the finish of his match. They're gambling real money on real results throughout the movie. So by default, you assume the wrestler must be close to the real wrestling. But I don't know about that. The choreographer of Paradise Alley is the legend Terry Funk. And you can tell, because a lot of these matches are so great. I also think Sly does a better job at selling the context of the sport. There's less wrestling overall in Paradise Alley, but in true Stallone fashion, there's a giant montage or so of 50 matches. I love the selling the performers give throughout the matches. Also, this montage is great because we get to see the infamous double turn. Cosmo becomes the good guy, and Lenny becomes corrupted with money. And poor Victor is getting all the damage. That's setting the table for the final showdown between Victor and Terry Funk's character. Before the match, Victor tells Cosmo,
You ought to be proud. Wait a minute. Why should I be proud?
You started everything. Let's go, Vic!
It's a heartbreaking scene, very reminiscent of the scene between Cassidy and Randy. We as an audience know Cosmo regrets starting any of this because we saw that last montage. But when confronted with this very real praise from his brother, it stings. Final wrestling match is done in the rain. I've watched a lot of wrestling over the years, but I've never seen two wrestlers duke it out in the middle of a storm. But that's what makes this movie more poetic than real. Of course the final show is in the rain. And of course the final match has to be 23 rounds. And it's all done in montage. Stallone wants you to know everything's on the line with this final match. There's these great painting of angels wrestling, and I can't help but think Stallone was influenced by those paintings. The way he photographs the male body is stunning. We really get to see every struggle, hit, and grimace. By the end, it seems like our boy Victor is licked, but Cosmo and Lenny go in for the save. But when Cosmo and Lenny seem to be outgunned, Victor hulks out and wins the match. What comes next is my favorite moment in any movie.
You weren't hurt?
No.
You almost threw the match?
Yeah.
You almost blew everything?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I like it better when it's just brothers.
In the end, it was about being brothers, not performers. Whew. That's Stallone, man.
Final thoughts. So what's the best? What's my favorite? Before I answer that, I want to talk about how sad both these movies are and how well they depict the struggles of wrestlers past their prime. Yes, the wrestler's all about that, and on face value, you might think Paradise Alley ignores it. But not only is a big plot point in Paradise Alley about Victor's mental health by having all these matches in such a short window, there's a tragic character of the name Big Glory. Big Glory is Randy the Ram. He was a once great wrestler. He lives in squalor and doesn't have a family to go back to. In the end, after having one crazy night with Cosmo, Big Glory decides to take his life. It's a very haunting moment in Paradise Alley because for the most part, the movie is comedic.
Cosmo, you know, in 100 years, this ain't gonna matter none. You take care, Santa Claus.
But Stallone doesn't let you forget that these performers don't have much to go back to when the time is done. Darren Aronofsky has this reputation of being a smart dude, but I always kind of thought of him as a film bro or a film jock. And Stallone has this reputation of being a meathead, but I think he's a little bit more than that. I think these films perfectly illustrate those ideas. The Wrestler hits you over the head with how tragic the life of a wrestler is, and it works, but there's very little room for nuance interpretation. Stallone's movie is silly and filled with dumb jokes and people being cartoons and people getting their pants pulled down. You might think there's no depth there, but dig a little deeper and you find the ocean.
What does any of that mean? I don't know. All I know is that my favorite wrestling movie is Paradise Alley, but in my opinion, The Wrestler is the best movie about professional wrestling. Actually, I'm kind of wrong on both counts. Because the best movie is Nacho Libre. No duh. Please remember to like and subscribe, brother. Cut.